Recording in progress.
Welcome to the public portion of the Chatham Township Committee meeting on February 21st, 2023. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I wanted to start off this evening with a moment of silence. We had two long-term firefighters with the Chatham Township Volunteer Fire Department that have passed away in the past couple of weeks. So if we could all take a moment here, and then I will speak about them. Okay, the first is Dave Wheelock. On Thursday, February 16th, 2023, Dave Wheelock, 73 years old, passed away. Dave was an employee of Chatham Township for 20 years in our Department of Public Works and then joined our Chatham Township Volunteer Fire Department ranks in 1973 for around 15 years. He was also a veteran of the Vietnam War, having served our country in the Navy. He proudly brought some military discipline to the firefighting officers, being elected several times as lieutenant and captain. Dave had a tremendous sense of humor and was a master carpenter and will be missed greatly. May he rest in peace. The next is Paul Carlson. Paul has been a member of Chatham Township's Volunteer Fire Department since 1977. During his 45 years with the department, Paul served as a lieutenant, captain, and finally a safety officer. He was a member of numerous committees and a regular behind the cash register during the annual Christmas tree sale. As much as Paul loved being a firefighter, he loved even more sharing that passion with all his nieces and nephews and eventually their children. Paul served as an active member up until his passing, regularly attending meetings, drills, community functions, and always preparing fire prevention materials for the children. He loved the department, and his ever dedicated presence around the firehouse will be missed greatly. May he rest in peace. All right, I'm going to move on to the approval of the agenda. Does anybody want to take anything else?
I just wanted to pull something out of the consent agenda.
Okay.
The resolution 2023-063 colony pool fees,
Okay.
and that's it.
And I'd
Anybody
like
else?
Yes, I'd like to pull out the 59 payment of bills, 62 appointing administrative assistant, and I have it as 66 setting colony pool fees. But
You know what?
whichever ordinance.
Yeah, no, you're right. I guess the latest version, I probably had an old version of the agenda when I wrote this down.
The one that you printed out says.
Well, 63 is the colony pool concession voted in.
Yeah, I
Oh.
was talking about fees, sorry, so I was 66,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So then it's okay. So we got number 1, 4, and 8.
Correct.
Okay. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda with those 3 resolutions pulled out?
So moved.
Second.
I'll second that.
Okay. Roll call. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
All right. Now we are going to move on to the Township Committee reports. Committeewoman Ewald, do you have a report?
Yes, I have a lot of report. My committees have all been very active, so I've got some updates. The Chatham Township Historical Society met. They hold programs monthly at the library and via Zoom. February's program was on the White House pets. The March 26th program is coordinated with Chatham Borough and will cover the First Ladies. There's a new exhibit at the Red Brick Schoolhouse on animals of Old Chatham Township. It'll be at the Red Brick Schoolhouse through the March open day at the schoolhouse, and then the photographs will be displayed in the Municipal Building Gallery. I wanted to make sure the committee was fully aware the Historical Society Board authorized the president to enter in a grant agreement with the New Jersey Historic Trust. I don't know if everybody remembers, but last year the Chatham Township Historical Society had won grants to do construction on the building from New Jersey Historical Trust and also from Morris County. So they entered into the grant agreement with the New Jersey Historic Trust, so that's gonna start moving forward. So they have to coordinate, township owns the building, so that's gotta be coordinated with the township. But we appreciate their efforts to get that money to improve that facility. The Environmental Commission met. The EV Expo with Madison and Chatham Borough is scheduled for April 19th. The spring yard sale is set for April 29th. Tree seedling giveaway is scheduled for April 22nd. And the EV charging stations are up and running, and they have generated some revenue despite not being marketed or linked to any apps or anything else. And then the Senior Center. There'll be a Civil War lecture will be held in honor of Gordon Granger, who was a Senior Center founder and long-term board member who passed away last year. Gordon Granger was an avid student of Civil War history, so there'll be a lecture on March 3rd at 12 p.m. in his honor. March 8th is a presentation on inspiring women in history. There's an intergenerational orchestra performance on March 15th. Really lots of good stuff. Their fundraising events is Senior Center Paper Shred and Sneaker Drive. That was very successful last time, so I hope residents take advantage of that opportunity. That fundraiser will take place on Saturday, April 22nd at the middle school. And their garden tour fundraiser will be on June 3rd, and there are still opportunities for sponsorship and for advertising. And I think that's everything for me.
Great, thank you. Committeeman Lois?
Yeah, so just for public utilities, I have the New Jersey American Water Grant information has been forwarded on to our staff, and specifically our administrator has told me that it will be on the workshop for next month, so that's good news. And other than that, that's it.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Hamilton?
Thank you. Mostly from the joint public library. You know, at its most recent board meeting, the Friends of the Library officially made a $40,000 contribution to the library, specifically for the purpose of furnishings for the currently under development teen center. So as always, the generosity of the Friends is greatly appreciated. And on that note, their annual book sale, which is a big event for the Friends and the library by extension in raising money, is going to be starting on March 11th. So we hope to see everybody out there for that. And that's pretty much all I have for this week.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the hearing of citizens. Currently, the committee room is open to the public, and we are looking forward to having you join us. Additionally, this meeting is being made available for public participation remotely. If you're watching via Zoom, you may speak during the public comment session by following the Zoom instructions to raise your hand. Whether in person or online, when you are recognized to speak, please say your name, spell your last name, and give your street number. As a reminder, all public comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Rather than use any of your time answering questions, we will wait until you finish speaking before responding. Each member of the public will be limited to 1 comment during the public comment session. Written comments submitted to the Township Clerk before 3 p.m. today will be read during the public comment sessions. Written comments are subject to the same guidelines as oral comments. Duplicative written comments may be summarized rather than read in full according to the guidelines issued by the New Jersey Division of Local Government Services. Greg, were there any written comments?
Yes, Mayor, I have one from Daniel Nialis of Yarmouth Road. He writes, just wondering if there has been clarification related to maintaining consistent property setback requirements. It has been nearly 90 days since I last raised this issue. I understand this has been referred to the planning board for their consideration. I have reviewed the planning board agenda over the period and have not seen any mention of this issue. I believe this is an issue which needs to be clarified and resolved to prevent a reoccurrence. It has been over 1.5 years since I initially raised this issue. So that's that. That's all I have for written.
Okay.
Do we know if the planning board is planning to take this up? Because I thought there was like 2 parts. If the planning board didn't want to address it, then it comes back to the committee.
I have not heard. At last I heard it was with the planning board. Do you guys know any chance?
I do know that after it was brought up to my attention for follow-up, I corresponded with Mr. Nealis. in October, in September, October, November, explaining to him what's going on. I spoke to John Rushke about this, who drafted a memo that I believe I copied all of you on that one, I think sometime in October. That memo was sent to the planning board and essentially advised them of the potential issue, and it's up to them to take that up. I'm not sure if that is something, though, that we can take on independent of them, though. But independent of them, the land use ordinance would still have to.
So usually you get the advice from the planning board, they would weigh in on it.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't decide to do it, you could amend an ordinance, the setback ordinances.
Do we need to formally refer it to them? I don't know if we've,
Well, usually any like zoning ordinance with the planning board, you refer to them, you get their input, you know, they're the main board. But if it's been a historic problem in the town and you feel it needs to be addressed, then you can take action.
I don't think anybody's debated that it needs to be addressed. I think it's where it's, who has the jurisdiction. So,
Can we
if we can
formally-
start it,
yeah.
let's just do it and then we'll hand it off to them.
If you do introduce an ordinance, it would have to be referred to the planning board for a master
Yes.
plan review.
But then it's formally
Yeah,
handed
but
over
it's
to
just a
them.
question if you want to get input before you draft an ordinance or wait until there's the master plan review.
Mayor, you may just
I
want
would,
to talk to the.
I would like to put this on the workshop, if I might suggest that, our next workshop. And in addition to that, we also have the outstanding issue of pervious, impervious coverage that should be well known here, where we have a problem in the zoning where there is a new product that allows impervious coverage, but can be used as calculated as pervious because it's, anyway, and it's been used in the township, and we have a glaring hole, and we know about that. So I think those are two sort of zoning planning matters that we should take up in workshop.
So why don't we reach out to our engineer and perhaps we can kind of go from there. Maybe Mr. McNeilis and well, Mark, if you want to add these to the workshop, can you send that, all the details of that to our administrator so we have that ahead of time?
The details of what are you asking me for, Mayor?
What you want added to the workshop meeting?
The impervious coverage issue?
Yeah, all the, yeah.
Sure. Pervious, impervious, sure. Yeah, that goes back to planning board and affordable housing issues. I'd be happy to put that together.
So that we can, have our engineer and everybody weigh in on it as well. All right, is there anybody else that wants to speak? Anybody in person? Nope. Oh, okay. Anyone online?
No interest.
All right. Going. All right, well then we will close out the public hearing of citizens and move on to the introduction of ordinances. The first one is ordinance 2023-01, the cap bank ordinance. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved,
Introduce?
so
Thank you.
introduced.
Introduce. Is there a second? I'll second it. Is there discussion? Any discussion?
Yeah, I'll just say this, the cap bank ordinance, to me, we've heard a lot of discussion and workshop about it adding flexibility, giving us a tool. I think that there is 3 words missing from that. It is a tool to increase spending. It gives us the flexibility to increase spending. So increased spending eventually means increases in taxes, increases in debt, or depletion of township assets. And that's the only way to pay for increased spending. So I am firmly against the cap bank ordinance as it is. It is not only allows additional spending in this year, which I hope that we don't pass in the budget, but it just extends the ability to spend yet even more in future years. And I don't think that's prudent or necessary in this township, especially given our past of 20% tax increase, 33% increase in debt. And we have heard extensively in workshop that you could have a increase in the cap bank or you could have an increase in appropriations without an increase in taxes. But I don't think that anyone who's reasonable would think that you could increase spending without there eventually being an increase in taxes. And there's no way to increase spending without increasing debt or the depletion of assets, even if you were to not increase the taxes immediately. But that would be subsequent and would be coming. So I'm firmly against the cap bank, and I remain so.
Yeah, I mean, as was discussed before, this just provides the opportunity, should a situation arise, which we've already experienced, whether it's COVID and you have additional expenses associated with that, or it's a healthcare surprise increase and you have additional expenses associated with that. The reality is, it's called appropriations, but it's the operating budget. So you already have built in 2 to 2.5% increase for DPW contracts, for police contracts. You already have more than that in an increase for healthcare, for utilities. So, it's always been, it is a growing budget. It's just the dynamics. You'd have to find shared service. You'd have to cut staff in order for it not to modestly grow along with those contracts, which are, somewhat linked to the cost of living increases. So this just allows, if the committee next year, the committee the year after needs the flexibility, that they have the ability to, at that point, approve or deny, because they can also deny that increase. And those recommendations come from the administrator and from the CFO. It's not people just looking to randomly spend money. It's all documented, it's all justified, and that committee at that point can decide whether or not they want to spend those funds.
There already remains a 4% carve out that for increases in the healthcare and a 5% increase for benefits.
Okay. We're not going back and forth. We already did the back and forth at the workshop. Look, so you said your piece, Committeeman Lois. Deputy Mayor, did you want to?
Well, I again, we discussed this at the workshop, and there's nothing to preclude us from discussing it within the parameters of Oprah or whatever, as far as, I have questions about this, to be certain, as Mr. Shahadi well knows, I think, and I continue to have questions about it, and I tend to agree in principle with a lot of things Committee Member Lois is saying about this. But I understand the potential, hypothetical, I'll say, benefits if used prudently and wisely as a tool and an option that is kept on the back burner. I also understand the recommendations of professionals, and there's something that I'm willing to consider. So in that context, I am willing to keep an open mind towards the introduction of this ordinance, but I want to make it perfectly clear that I share concerns about the absolute need for this, and it's something that I think that we as a committee are going to have to explore a little bit more between now and adoption, if it's going to happen.
My attitude is, for one, I would like to take a look. We have not had our first finance committee meeting yet, so I would like to take a look and see where we are with our budget and everything. We didn't pass it last year, so I'm a little bit more open-minded to pass it this year as in every other year type of flexibility thing. My main issue is really if we just need to appropriate funds in the next 2 years to increase public safety. That's kind of the one thing that really gets to me at all times, meaning as if we have to, if there's an emergency that comes up and we are in the need to hire more patrol officers, or really whatever our police need, I see this as giving us a tool to be able to do that in a situation where there's so many other things that are out of control, like our state health insurance that has increased, that we have zero control over. So that's my leaning, but I do share a lot of the concerns of just spending. That's not anything that I would ever be okay with, just giving us another ability to just spend. That's not my thought process at all. But if there's ever a situation that we're in need to spend some extra money in order to cover an emergency, especially when it comes to public safety, I wouldn't say spend, it's appropriate. I think we need to have that flexibility. So, all right, can we get a roll call?
Mrs. Ewald,
Yes.
Mr. Lois,
No.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton,
Yes.
Mayor Felice.
Yes.
Motion passes. Public hearing will be on March 21st.
Okay, the next ordinance on our agenda is ordinance 2023-02, car theft ordinance. Can I get a motion to adopt, or to introduce, excuse me?
So moved.
Is there, okay, any discussion?
Yes. A couple of things. I just want to make sure, for starters, that residents understand this isn't, a magic bullet. It's not going to fix things. The key thing that helped in the past few months has been people locking up their cars and taking their key fobs out. A lot of this is already covered on existing legislation. Our police chief is interested in implementing this to help for clarification. He's explained that he doesn't like operating in the gray area, so he prefers clarification. And we cleaned up some of the language at the workshop meeting. There was a resistance to change the sixth paragraph, which I was interested in. I would suggest, it was to remove it. I asked for the removal. I would suggest a change to it instead. If we're not trying to act on emotion and on purely politics, the reality is that when you look at the New Jersey State Police and their comments on this, they've said a lot of the increase in theft has been driven by demand for luxury cars in other countries as a major driver, and a lot of the theft is because people are leaving their key fobs in their cars. So a more accurate statement, as opposed to an emotional statement, would be, which I'm recommending to change, whereas the increase in key fob car access, the demand for luxury cars in other countries, and the change in state laws has resulted in an increase in car thefts. Because those things are not referenced here, and it really is important. If we're not being emotional and we're really trying to be objective in stating what the issues are, it's a more comprehensive, and the fix needs to be more comprehensive, which there are a lot of activities occurring at the state level. I think there's like 6 things that are being pursued at the state level to fix all these problems. So that's what I would recommend. I could say it again if you want to hear it again. Whereas the increase.
Are you suggesting that we add this whereas, or are you suggesting that it be in substitution of that?
It's-
Suggesting that the last whereas clause be modified in some way.
So the current whereas clause says, whereas the change in state laws which lead to criminal catch and release remain unaddressed by state lawmakers and are encouraging lawless behavior in our community. I'm suggesting we change it to, whereas the increase in key fob car access, the demand for luxury cars in other countries, and the change in state laws has resulted in increase in car thefts. Take the emotion out of it and just state the facts. That's what we're here to do.
So I don't disagree with adding it, but I just feel like we have already discussed this in workshop. And I don't feel,
Well, the introduction is the place to make any final changes, because then it goes to public hearing.
right.
And we want to be able to circulate it.
I don't think that we can just say, well, we've discussed it in workshops, so there's no further discussion. I mean, that seems to belie the entire idea of an ordinance being introduced and then public hearing and
That's
then
not what I said.
passage. I would also just add that my main problem with this ordinance is that the amount of time that's elapsed since it was first introduced. I mean, I suggested this in its body in November, and here we are, and it's not going to go into effect until May or so by my calculation, and that's my only issue with it. So whatever needs to get done to push this on.
Yeah, I mean, just to give you peace of mind on that piece, I did talk to the police chief, and he said the existing ordinances on the books, you could charge all of this and deal with all of this on the existing ordinances on the books. they've never been used because by the time they get there, the thieves are gone. So it hasn't been used to date, and it can be used if needed in the interim. So I don't want anybody
The
to feel
dollar
like,
amounts were increased, though. The dollar amounts were increased, so maybe the penalty was there, but not by the amount.
the dollar amounts are on the books, the penalties are on the books. This is just clarifying that it would be for every incident, every
I
occasion.
took them off our code books and increased them, so I know that the existing code has lower penalties than this.
So, I mean, there was a motion to introduce. Are we changing this to a motion to amend? Or how are,
Mayor, if I may, technically,
Yes.
there should be, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. King, there should be a motion to introduce and a second, and if you want to discuss an amendment, then
make
a
a
motion to
second.
make that amendment.
Okay.
And then a second, you can discuss that amendment then.
Okay.
But, you know,
Thank you.
before you get into the amendment and the motion on that, Mr. Clerk, was there a motion and second on the introduction yet?
yes.
Yes, there was a motion by Mrs. Ewald and a second by our deputy mayor to.
Right, so I think the
introduce.
next thing is
a
a motion to amend.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're changing the way we've always done things. We've always amended during the introduction process, so.
Well, this is
I need
still.
to, I know. I
This
would've-
is still the same thing. It's just
I know,
trying.
but I would have motioned to amend first
No,
before
no, no, no,
motioning
no.
to
No, no,
introduce.
you-
No,
you
it's
introduce
fine.
it.
You're fine.
You're fine, I'm just
You're
clarifying that.
fine.
You
So
introduce
basically, you motion to introduce and then a motion to amend.
Correct.
So
So,
you're
that's-
good.
Yeah, but don't we
And
have to
that's what
vote
you
on the motion to introduce?
No, they're
No,
saying
you'll be-
no.
yeah,
You
You're
can still.
gonna, so you're gonna make a motion to amend, and then you're gonna vote on the introduction as amended.
Okay,
Correct.
then I'll make a motion to amend it.
Right.
As I read it again, right?
Yeah.
So you're looking to amend it with the language that you've already stated, correct?
Correct.
and then if there's a second, then you vote on that amendment.
And if it passes,
Correct. If it passes, then you're voting on the ordinance as amended. If it fails, you're voting on the original ordinance.
Can you read it one more time?
The revision is whereas the increase in key fob car access, the demand for luxury cars in other countries, and the change in state laws has resulted in an increase in car thefts.
and there was, I think, someone had said to add that, your motion is
My
to-
motion is to
To replace?
switch out, replace paragraph 6, 1, 2,
With
3,
that.
4, 5, 6, with that. Still references the state laws, doesn't get into any other, the things that I'm not even sure what the terminology is specifically references.
Well, I'm not sure what the terminology the state laws references. It's totally vague and ambiguous.
It's vague here.
No, I don't think it's vague. I think, I think you said lead. I believe the pronunciation intended there is led. The change in state laws, which led to this current environment of catch and release and encouraging of lawless behavior. That's the important part of this whereas clause from my standpoint. And again, these whereas clauses are statements of reasons that do, to a certain extent, have a political and informational, aspect as far as the reason for the ordinance. The ordinance itself, it's not technically part of the ordinance, is my understanding, that goes into the ordinance book. And I, for one, am not supportive of the proposed amendment. I think it places the blame, to the extent who cares about the blame necessarily, but I'm not in favor of placing the blame on some unidentified foreign actors who want luxury cars and not where it squarely belongs, which is utter negligence by our state's lawmakers in Trenton, which is the real problem that we're trying to address here. So I'm not in favor of that. And is it an intervening cause? Yes. So maybe there's a compromise where we could add, keep the whereas clause as drafted, with the insertion of something along the lines of whatever you said, key fob access and demand for cars, and exactly what it says here. I could compromise on that, I think.
I'd be fine with
Mr.
that.
Hamilton, if that's your motion, I will second it.
So there's already a motion to.
Just
amend
so I understand also, what is,
And then do another motion to amend, adding that.
yeah, I'm just trying to understand, what does criminal catch and release refer to? Are you talking about bail reform? Are you talking about juvenile justice reform? I don't even know, because it's typically referring to immigration reform. And there's been a rise in car thefts across the country, regardless of what they do at a
New
state
Jersey's
legislative.
by far the worst.
It was 17% versus 21%.
Yeah, well, we're talking
National
about the
versus-
rise that's readily apparent to every single
Yeah.
person who lives
So
in this
I'm-
town.
so
I
what were
don't
you
care
referring
about
to?
what's happening in this town.
Yeah.
And I
Alright.
think that state policies, that whatever you wanna call them, the effect is that car thieves or would-be car thieves get captured and immediately released. That's a fact.
And you do
Okay.
know that the car thefts are down dramatically in town because people are locking up their cars.
I do
It's
know
not the
that.
only
It's not
reason.
down enough. It
There's
should
a
be
lot of
close to
reasons, you're right.
zero.
It's not the only reason.
As
But,
far as I'm
but
concerned.
nobody changed, the legislation at the state level hasn't changed.
All right.
Motion on the floor to amend as Committeewoman Ewald.
Is there a second on just what Committeewoman Ewald had?
There's no second.
All right, so that motion fails.
Now, is there
Did you want to make a motion to amend to add her?
In spirit of compromise, I will make that motion, that we amend it to include, start with what's written,
So would that be amend, would
And add a whereas.
be a paragraph under the
At-
sixth paragraph or above?
leave the sixth paragraph, start with the sixth paragraph as is. You have whereas, comma, then insert the language proposed by Mrs. Ewald. The increase in key fallback car access, the demand for luxury cars in other countries, comma, insert
well.
that, and then just, and the word and. So basically inserting after the whereas, comma, the increase in key fob car access, comma, the demand for luxury cars in other countries, comma, and then leave the rest of it as is.
You're changing state law.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that would be the amendment.
I second that motion.
Okay, can we vote on that motion?
Yes, we're voting just on the amendment at this point.
Yes.
Mrs. Ewald?
Yes.
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton?
Yes.
And Mayor Felice?
Yes.
Motion passes.
This was good. Good compromise, guys. Okay, so now can I get a motion to introduce as amended?
As amended.
It was introduced, it's been amended, so you just vote on.
Vote on the introduction as amended.
As amended.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Mrs. Ewald?
Yes.
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton?
Yes.
And Mayor Felice?
Yes.
Motion passes and public hearing on March 21.
Okay, great. Now we have the last ordinance this evening, which is ordinance 2023-03, and that is the parking on Southern Boulevard. Can I get a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All right, can we get a vote?
Mrs. Ewald?
Yes.
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton?
Yes.
And Mayor Felice?
Yes.
Motion passes, public hearing on March 21.
Okay, now I'm going to move on to our consent agenda. Okay, can I get a motion to adopt resolutions 60, 61, 63, 64, 65, 67, and 68?
So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, and a roll call vote?
Mrs. Ewald?
Yes.
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton?
Yes.
And Mayor Felice?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Can I get a motion to adopt resolution 59, payment of bills?
So moved.
Second? Anybody? I'll second it. And discussion.
Yeah, I pulled this, again, it's the payment of bills. We had the bills on Friday. There were 0 working days this time between when we received the payment of bills and this meeting. And, you know, the problem is not improving from my perspective. The last time we discussed this, it was to be included in workshop, to be discussed in workshop, was my understanding. We didn't do that. And, but I am very happy to say that in the interim, I have asked for a report on 2022's payment of bills, and I have been going through this volume, very large document. It's over 600 pages, and very happy to go through that, and have found many things that I will be raising in terms of the payment of bills and the sources of funds. and it just seems to me that we were able to produce that report, and perhaps as a compromise, maybe that the report that I was issued, which is not the check registry, possibly that could be a solution to this issue. But the issue remains with payment of bills, the distance between when we receive them and when we're asked to approve them. In my view, it persists.
I don't see a problem with the Friday before the meeting. That gives a full weekend. I mean, that's what we do with all of our everything that we have.
The issue is follow up with staff. If I raise an issue, they cannot get back to me in time to make the change. And then the question becomes, okay, in the past, what we had done was the payment of bills, maybe there would be, even because of a holiday, like in this case, there's no days between, but then what happens is I'm able to pull them out, and then there was resolution afterwards. We would say all except for this would be, all bills would be paid except for this or that. And that doesn't, in my understanding, that doesn't seem to be an option any longer.
I mean, we've kind of beat this to death at literally every single meeting for the past 6 months.
But at the last workshop meeting, didn't we have some sort of, I thought we landed, correct, I wasn't fully prepared to discuss this, but we landed on some sort of hypothetical, something that we worked our way to that we thought might represent some sort of solution to this. I can't frankly recall as I sit right here what it was, but I think, I trust Mr. Shoddy probably has a better recollection than I do.
My recollection of it was, and it may be mistaken, because again, there was just a lot of discussion on it. I don't know that we landed on a consensus, but I thought that because the payment of bills, what you're approving is the vendors and the amounts, that it could still be approved. The accounts can change at any time. That if there was a concern with a payment itself being made, obviously, we could pull that at any time before the meeting, and when you vote on the bills, it's not included in there. But if it has to do with an account change, that it could be discussed at the following workshop meeting.
Yeah, I recall that conversation. That's not what I'm thinking of.
I think it was.
What I'm thinking of has something to do with.
Edmonds, the computer, access to the computer.
Yeah, I think it had something to do with when the bills start working their way through the process. If there's some way members of the committee member Lois or whatever could have access, or again, I think there was a computer program to see what is being considered by the professionals who ultimately go through the process of approving, and then it works its way to our inbox on Friday or Monday or whatever. But if there was some way we could access this information beforehand.
After that meeting, committee,
yeah.
After that discussion, workshop, I resent the email that I sent out to the whole committee last year. I resent it after our workshop meeting with how to access Edmonds, the login information, how to install it. And I think Committeewoman Ewald, you contacted me about setting it up after that.
I couldn't
email,
do it
so.
on my computer, but I have to try my laptop. I haven't tried my laptop, but I do wanna, I gotta do that. I wanna be able to go in and take a look also. But the reality is, there was no dispute of paying the bills. It was always where it was booked, and that could be changed at a later date. So I don't think there's any, and if there is a question about a bill, they're very responsive. So
I was
receiving
emailing
it on
with nearly all of you over the weekend.
yes, yeah.
Of course. All right, so we have
the essential issue then was if we're saying, okay, well, I can contact you at any time about what category this should be, then the approval should not come just from me or just from the finance committee. This approval should be from the committee itself. I mean, it should be from the whole of the committee.
All right.
I should be.
Well, I mean, you've made this argument for months, and it doesn't change the fact that we still have to pay the bills. So, you can always change where it's.
We could discuss it at the subsequent workshop meeting.
But we've
again,
literally discussed it ad nauseum.
The
Okay, well, that was proposed in the last time I raised
gets
this,
to
and it was not
vote
Right.
on it, then do it at the workshop
That could
meeting.
Right.
resolve this, certainly.
All right, so let's go for a vote.
Mrs. Ewald?
Yes, I'm lost track of what I'm voting on.
Mr.
Yes.
Lois?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton?
Yes.
And Mayor Fleece?
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, the next is Resolution 62, appointing administrative assistant. Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, and discussion.
Okay, I called this out, and I just want to put in public session that, this position did not exist prior to 2019. It is a full-time position with full-time benefits. I have no issue with the appointment being made as to the person, but just to the position. Creating or continuing this position, which is fairly new to our township, if at all, if done at all, should be a part-time position, especially given the increase in the health benefits and pension that we've seen. And it doesn't make sense to me that we should have a full-time position for something that historically we never had. And when there has been both additional staff added, and our anticipation is that the staff is not going to grow. So I'm against the idea of this position being a full-time position.
Anybody else? I think my 2 cents is, we've had this position for a few years now. This is not creating a new position. It's filling one that we already had, that there was a vacancy. And I could tell you, I am at you guys' offices at least 3-4 times a week, almost daily. It's not like I see anybody sitting around. I mean, they're working their tail off at all times. I never see people just hanging out chatting. I think if they did that for more than a couple minutes, Z would be right on top of it. So, I mean, it's one thing if I thought that the administrative assistant was sitting around on Facebook, on social media, not doing anything and wasn't busy, then I would absolutely agree with you. But I have not seen that at all. I've seen them being put to work and doing some really good work. I've seen them organizing our contracts and making sure that everything is up to date so that we're on top of everything, things that haven't been done in years. And I see massive organizational improvement in the past couple of months, and I think that we should continue that. So, and I think that will end up being a cost saving in itself. So that's where I stand. Can we get a vote?
Mrs. Ewald?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
No.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton?
Yes.
Mayor Fleece?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, the last resolution is Resolution 66, setting colony pool fees for 2023. Can I get a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second? Anyone? I'll second. Any discussion?
Yeah, so I asked to have this pulled out. My comment was very simple. It just round the numbers, which the administrators seemed reasonable, seemed to be, thought was within reason, and they had considered it. But, we have 2023 season, $577 for family couple membership, $417. I just thought, let's just round it up or round it down. And if you round it down, I guess it's within the 2 to 3%, because wasn't everything closer to the 3%? So that was my only comment.
You okay with rounding the numbers?
Yeah, Mayor, no objection. I just wanted to be very forthcoming in the memo I prepared in these rates, because I didn't want there to be a situation where we were above 3%, sometimes even those few dollars. So we're totally fine with it. We went back and forth on the rounding up, the rounding down. I also thought we're putting these all in the electronic system, so it looks nicer, it's easier for math, and probably people will like that as well. We're ambivalent as staff on which way we go with it, so it's up to you. But whatever it is, and then it was also calculating. So the early bird rate is a 5% discount off of the seasonal rates. So you're going to end up with some sort of fluctuation there, right? If we do if we round up the 2023 season rates, and then 5% off of that, or just come up with a round number on both sides, regardless of the percentage. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
think
just
if you're
let-
telling people it's a 5% discount and that happens to calculate to something else, that's fine. I think that's understandable. It's just,
Okay.
otherwise it was kind of,
I mean, I'm fine either way, especially if it's electronic. It's pretty much just in the system where everyone's signing up on their credit card anyway. It's one thing if we were really, doing cash at the door. But I mean, even still, nobody really pays cash for anything anymore. So I don't
Yeah,
care.
it's
Whatever
entirely up to you
guys.
guys. It really doesn't matter to us. Like I said, it was just more of from the optics, the making sure that the percentages, trying to keep
Yeah.
everything consistent. Because as you saw from the spreadsheet, I think maybe rounding in the past or whatever may have led to these large differences as you
Yeah.
keep, adding on top of it. Doesn't matter. I just want to make it clear that, what we're trying to do here is make sure that the pool starts to balance itself, and that, the costs that are going up right now, in terms of expenses, chlorine alone has doubled in price. Went from almost $1.50, actually $1.40 or so, to over $3.50 or $3.60 under the co-op prices this year. So all of our expenses are going up, and the pool did operate at a deficit the last 2 years. We're just trying to get them a little bit more in line. We're not turning this into a profit maker, but we want to make sure that our costs are accounted for. So we appreciate your consideration in this. We think that the rates are fair. And whether you want to round them up or not, just let me know so we can adjust these here right now.
What are we talking about, like to fives? Not to nitpick, but
Fives.
Zeros or fives, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah?
that's what I'm thinking. So,
While I'm supportive of cost rationalization, especially from a business point of view, what I don't understand is if you actually look at the revenue that this is going to generate, and you actually look at the membership categories. For instance, the early bird category of non-resident family, which would be our friends in Chatham Borough, basically, that's the lion's share of non-resident family memberships. That fee went from $550 from an early bird to $630, according to this resolution and schedule. That's an increase of 14.5%. The increase to township members, township residents, family membership went from $510 to $548. It's a 7.4% increase. So where we were told that this would be going up 2 to 3%, the lion's share of the increases are much greater than that. There's also decreases. So, and they're all on the non-resident side. So non-resident individual members has decreased from $315 to $302 for regular season. There's been a decrease from $160 to $148 for a babysit if you're non-resident. Non-resident senior couple membership, I'm sorry, that has increased. The other one that's decreased is non-resident couple membership, $550 down to $480. So I'm not really sure how this was totally calculated. It seems like you went to the season rate
I
and
pulled up
then
the spreadsheet
calculated
right
the
now.
early bird rate. The issue with that, of course, is that 2/3 of all membership in 2021 was early bird. In 2022, I would suspect that it's the same or slightly higher. Maybe 75% of all memberships purchased during the early bird period. We do know that in 2021 and earlier, 80% of the revenue is from family and non-resident family categories. The only other category that's even worth discussing, because a lot of times we get down in the weeds here and we're talking about every single membership category that have an impact on revenue, is guest passes. So it goes, and I've said this before here, so it's probably not a surprise, but family membership's the number one revenue stream. Non-resident family membership's number two revenue stream. Number three revenue stream is guest passes. And guest passes have increased 10%. Those three major categories are up 7.4% for early bird, 14.5% for early bird, and 10%. Those are the real increases that have been made. This is not a 2 to 3% increase. And I think this really needs some heavy lift revision. The other issue is this resolution doesn't completely line up with our ordinance because we've omitted patrons of the pool. And that is still in the books in
Well,
the
we
ordinance.
never implemented a patrons of the pool program.
So, Mayor, if I may, I mean,
Yes.
I included a memo which explained all
Yeah.
of this. We tackled the township resident memberships because that's a priority, is township residents. That is 3%. The non-resident memberships, as I explained in the analysis, was all over the place. Couples were paying 35% more, while families were paying only 16% more. Babysitters were paying, the percentages on the premiums for non-resident versus resident was all over the place. So what we did is we standardized it to a 15%, which is less than the average increase. So the increase across the board on average for non-residents was 19%. We standardized it at 15% and kept everything within a formula. So yeah, in some cases, it was a few dollars less, and in others, it was a little bit more. But what we've done here is create a very transparent and very easy to understand process for setting these rates. As for the patrons membership, nobody used that last year.
It was never implemented. There was no
So
program that was.
we kept the rate as is. Unless we change it, the rate is as is. And we didn't do away with it. So there's nothing inconsistent with the ordinance here. It's simply a fee adjustment that, because nobody's using and it's not defined and nobody even really knows what it accomplishes, was just left out from this resolution, so there's no increase in it. But based off of, the analysis that you all see in the spreadsheet and the memo, it was all very clearly explained as to this methodology.
Chatham Borough residents.
Mark, we let you speak. Let's give everybody a chance to speak.
I do appreciate Mr. Lois's perspective regarding their early bird charges. I hadn't looked at them specifically compared to last year. And I'm trying to remember, you did the early bird at 5%. What was the average? I'm wondering if we change it to like 7.5%, because I do want,
Last
a lot
year-
of memberships came in through early bird, and I want to make sure we have that incentive, and this isn't a deep enough discount to incent people to jump in earlier, so I wonder if we should raise that percentage.
Right, there is a question whether the early bird is what also hurt us in terms of revenue in 2022 as opposed to 2021. The early bird discount is not necessarily one that needs to be set by resolution. The ordinance that was created last year puts the discount programs within the purview of the administrator and the colony pool liaison. So we just put them in here so that it's transparent up front. So that way you could see, and it was 5%. The numbers last year, according to the spreadsheet, again, no methodology. Some of them were almost 8.9%, some were 4% discounted, some were 3%, some were 7%, some were 15%. In fact, an early bird non-resident family got a bigger discount than a resident family early bird registration.
Exactly, correct.
So, again, the residents is who we're looking to serve here primarily.
Yes.
Any differences here are being subsidized by the taxpayers of Chatham.
Right. That's my concern. You just said it right there. That's my concern.
So-
My attitude is that this is a taxpayer-funded asset. It doesn't pay for itself. We pretty much fund it. We, as residents, should be getting the benefit of that because we're the ones funding it. Plain and simple. I don't mind charging non-residents more because they're not paying the taxes to pay for it. As much as I'd like to have a free asset for everyone in the whole world to use, it costs money to operate.
And I think when you gave these deeper discounts last year for early bird, I think that the decrease in revenue last year is what you ended up seeing with that. I mean, the discounts are great, but honestly, people are registering online. It doesn't matter to us if they're registering a month or two before this time.
Yeah.
I could understand if you're dealing with paper applications and IDs and you want to generate, but we're not doing that. We didn't do any of that. So what is truly the advantage of an early bird discount?
Yeah, we need
Just
the money
settle
for
it.
it.
Early
rate.
bird existed in 2021 as well as 2022. So
Right.
you can't compare 2021 versus 2022. In 2021, it was credited to Mrs. Ewald for her suggestion of it, and it did enormously drive up early commitment and membership. Committing to a summer is very important to a pool, especially if your kids are going to be part of programs like tennis and swim team and swim lessons. and those are the other things that drive revenue. And we know that we need to drive total bodies at the pool in order to drive revenue, because if you're there to buy, when you buy a family membership, whether you're a resident or a non-resident, you're buying guest passes and you're buying food from the snack shack and you're participating in the programs. So there's a certain amount of getting bodies up. This is not a question of raising fees to simply to raise revenue. If that was the simple formula, like any accountant would tell you, that raise your prices, raise your prices. Any business owner will tell you that doesn't entirely work. You need to create incentives and programs and look at it from a model point of view. And the pool was finally modeled and in 2021. That's why the membership doubled and the revenue tripled in that year. And to look at it only from a fee point of view is silly. And try to explain.
Well, that's how we have to look at it, because we are determining the prices.
That's not how it's looked at
That's
in
exactly the
business.
entire
In a business,
purpose
you
of
would
this
look at it
discussion
from-
right now.
You would model revenue in a business, and you would
Alright.
look at a business model altogether.
Anybody else have
Explain-
any input?
I mean, the only other aspect I will add to that is it is a business and we're competing with other pools. So that's a little bit why we wanted to get that early commitment before people jump to other pools, which they do. You know, it's especially when you get to concrete and sand and everything else. So, that, you know, that's a little bit of what generated it. But I get what you're talking about. I'm kind of looking a little bit at the incentive, and I wonder if, you know, there's something else, a different rate, you know, just to give a little bit more of a discount.
Is there a recommendation to pull this to come up with a new number?
Well-
We need to publish and get the mailing out by March. So if otherwise we're gonna need a special meeting or another meeting to vote on this.
So we don't want to pull it. We want to.
I mean, either that or
We can add it right now. We have a pen. We have a pen. Is there any? I mean, specific.
But the issue is not
Right.
the season
Well-
rates. The season rates are fine. They're increased 2 to 3%. It's the early bird. So why don't we follow the ordinance? Let me, as the liaison to the Colony Pool, take this back to the pool committee. Let them
We
make
don't have-
suggestions what the early bird rate.
We've already
should be.
addressed that. If we were to not vote on this tonight, we would have to either set another meeting, or we wouldn't be able to adopt it in enough time
No,
to
we
send
do
out
address
mailers in
it.
March.
We do address it by just simply eliminating the early bird column. Let the promotion be as it is controlled in the ordinance, which is according to the administrator and the township, the Colony Pool liaison. And you simply allow me to take it back to the pool committee quickly and suggest what the early bird rate should be to the administrator, and then the promotion is set as it is in the ordinance.
Okay, my attitude is, where do you guys stand?
Are we in agreement on 2023 that it's,
Yeah,
because he's saying they could do early bird, so let's take that off the table.
Rates ourselves.
You could do-
The ordinance allows.
That's, yeah,
the
well, I'm
ordinance
here,
allows for us to do it that way, but
I think it's good practice for us to vote on it.
to make it transparent, so it's very clear here, and that way if there's any conflicts between the committee, the pool committee, and what's ultimately designed, it's not dragging things out, or, you know.
Yeah.
It really should have been done with you, directly, or, you know.
So you want to just go through line by line and agree to it, right?
I think if you want it, what I'm trying to understand with the early bird, what is the objection? It's not enough? We could
They
do
want
10%?
to, or,
So just, why don't you go out each one and
A
have some.
14% increase to an early
Well,
bird to
that's not-
non-resident families.
we're not talking about
issue.
14%, we're talking about across the board of the early bird price.
It's not across the board. It's 7.4%, 2.8%, 6.4%, 1.6%.
No, you're looking
5.8%.
at an entirely different column. You're comparing the 2022 rates to the 2023 rates.
Right, which is
The-
how members would look at it. That's how the customer base would look at it.
So with regard to the family membership early
So-
bird, it's 548 new resolution. Is there a number that's recommended it should be? More?
Z, question for you. Have you gone through this with our recreation director and our pool manager? What's his opinion on these rates?
He thinks that these are justifiable, that these are not going to adversely impact our membership numbers.
Okay.
We
Does
both
he
feel that way.
recommend
We would
these
not-
rates?
Yes.
Okay, so, I mean, then I'm fine with it. At some point, we have to rely on our professionals and our staff.
I mean, if you, I'm trying to hear what the objection is, so maybe I can offer, like, what is exactly the objection? Because, again, I think we went from rounding
If
numbers.
your goal is
different
even to
objections.
raise
Yeah.
revenue, and we're saying we want to raise revenue, why have the season rates for non-resident individual members decreased? Why has the season rate for non-resident babysitter?
Committeeman Lois, have you gone through, like, it clearly you have issues with every
memo
single
was-
one. Did you present any of this before this meeting? To the administrator and our recreation, or our colony pool manager?
If you're asking me, did our administrator?
No, I'm asking you if you reached out to our administrator and our colony pool manager to discuss your issues with every single item on this.
Yes, I reached out to Larry and I was told.
What
initially
about
that
our administrator?
I have not reached out to our administrator about all of these rates. I thought
Okay,
that
well,
the
I
committee
mean-
was in control of these rates as they are a resolution before us.
You didn't know if there was a resolution on this? We discussed it at the workshop meeting last week, or last meeting.
I did know, but my understanding is that these rates are in the control of this committee, not in the control of our administrator.
That's by
You're-
ordinance.
I also
You just,
completely disagree. I also completely disagree with the memorandum that we received, because it mixes capital expenses with operating expenses in his analysis of how the pool is done or how the pool is operating.
right,
And what its
so
costs
then,
and revenue stream are. So I didn't.
put all the
That
charges
doesn't.
in open
That's not
space.
really of interest to me. What was interesting to me is to get to rates that are going to make the pool successful.
Uh,
okay,
Just going back a step, so I'm assuming we're gonna set aside the early bird, cause you guys can deal with that. But the 2023 season, the non-resident membership, what was the percentage increase you did
I'm
on the
sorry?
resident?
Say
The
that again?
2023 season recommendation, the non-resident memberships, what was the percentage increase you decided on?
It was
over?
15% across the board. So to recap from what the memo said is, we looked at the resident membership rates just for the regular registration fees, and we added 3% to each of those memberships. So that's how we came up with the top block, 2023 season, 3% over last year. Based off of those, we added 15% to each category. So that's how we arrived at the non-resident membership rate. So all the non-resident membership rates are 15% more than those. That's why, for example, the non-resident individual membership is lower, because it was just arbitrarily higher last year
Right.
than all the others.
Right.
As I said, if you look at the spreadsheet, some of them are lower, some of them are higher. There was no rhyme or reason. So we standardized it, that if you're a non-resident, especially you want to justify, I think legally, why there's a difference in resident and non-resident rates, it's easy to say it's 15% rather than just arbitrary numbers.
yeah. I mean, that makes total sense to me, and I, just looking at these early bird rates, I've looked at your spreadsheet, I've gone through the numbers, it seems perfectly reasonable to me. I'm totally fine adopting this resolution as is. And I think we just need to call for a vote. I mean, this can go on forever.
So the resolution as is.
Yeah.
Mrs. Ewald?
Yes,
Mr. Lois?
No.
Deputy Mayor Hamilton?
I got one, sorry, I know we're voting. I have to roll call on this, I have a question still.
That's fine.
Can we go back to the discussion? Just, the statute, the ordinance provides for discretion for setting the early bird. You know, just in consultation between the liaison and you, right?
For both, actually.
Oh, for both.
For the regular rates and the early bird. So in 2022, you adopted an ordinance that created ranges, and the ordinance provided for the administrator in consultation with the colony pool liaison to set the rates and set promotions. However,
only to
Pause
step
it right there.
up.
however, just.
Did that did that happen prior to this resolution finding its way onto the agenda?
No, it was just brought up at workshop.
Okay.
Because if it was done that way, you would not be voting on it at all. The ordinance
Yeah.
does not provide necessarily for a vote, so then there's no transparency in terms of how we're doing this.
I
It's
get
just
it, but it
deciding-
seems like if we passed an ordinance that said the rates should be set, I would read it kind of as saying, and I get your point about the transparency, should be set in the first instance by consultation between the administrator and the liaison. But we decided this year we wanted to have a more transparent public vote on it, but it still seems like, I'm seeing why that process didn't happen anyway. So when it came to the committee, it was a joint recommendation of,
Right.
of the administrator and the liaison.
Well, it sounds
You know,
like
which-
the liaison didn't reach out to the administrator.
Or vice versa. But,
I mean, I reached out to all of you with the memo
Yeah.
and
Right.
the spreadsheet and
Yeah.
the analysis. I got no feedback on that.
I mean, I think your analysis and your spreadsheet,
I mean, I think,
It's
all right,
it's
so let's go
self-explanatory.
back to the vote. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that I get the point that maybe there should have been more communication between the various people directly involved, and I realize not every member of the committee is, ultimately, we're responsible for voting on these things, but we obviously have certain areas that we're focused on individually and everything. It seems to me like there was a recommendation from the professionals. There was a memo and an opportunity to comment on it, and now we're in a situation where we want to pass this.
You mean the 0 business day opportunity to comment?
Committeeman Lois, he's trying to vote, please.
I mean, these rates seem reasonable to me. You know, I get that there is nitpicking to be done, and maybe something is gonna have to be different next year, but let's vote.
Yeah, we're voting.
Okay, I vote yes, yeah,
All
that's
right.
a little unorthodox.
Mayor, please.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, now we're moving on to the second public comment hearing. And is there anybody that wants to speak? Anybody online, on Zoom?
No.
Anybody in person? All right, then I will go ahead and close that hearing of citizens and get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.
We always spend the most time on colony pool fees, it's crazy.